Where do we actually find ultimate spiritual truth? When we think about reaching enlightenment or finding the Buddha, we usually picture someone sitting in total silence in a remote mountain cave, right? Completely detached from the world. But what if the profound spiritual awakening you're looking for isn't hiding on some mountaintop at all? What if it's actually waiting for you right in the middle of your morning commute, or even while you're just standing there washing the dishes? To really unpack this, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating text for today's explainer. It's called Dharma Lessons for Lecturers, Volume 3. And what makes this source material so special is how it takes these incredibly lofty, ancient Eastern philosophies and translates them directly into actionable, highly informative wisdom for our modern, let's face it, pretty chaotic lives. It completely bridges that gap between the sacred and the absolutely mundane. Right out of the gate, the text hits us with a massive paradigm shift. It says seeking Buddha from the outside is a demon. Now, in this context, a demon doesn't mean some scary monster hiding under your bed. It actually means a distraction, a delusion. The author is essentially arguing that if you're looking for ultimate spiritual cultivation through external, mystical experiences, waiting for a magical sign to drop from the heavens, you are entirely on the wrong path. Okay, so if we aren't supposed to look outside, what exactly are we looking for? Well, the text redefines the true Buddha for us. It's not a deity sitting on a cloud waiting to be worshipped. Instead, it's the inherent Buddha nature that already exists within all sentient beings. It's an internal state of ultimate awareness and compassion. And honestly, the most crucial part of this, it's actualized, meaning brought into reality, exclusively through our everyday actions. Which brings us to the absolute core thesis of the text. Dharma is daily life, and daily life is Dharma. Now, Dharma, meaning the universal truth or the teachings of the Buddha, is not somehow separate from your daily routine. The source heavily emphasizes that the most profound spiritual practice doesn't happen when you escape your chores. No, it happens directly in the middle of them. So, if our everyday life is the actual practice ground, where do we even start? Well, the text explains that before we can even think about achieving some high-level spiritual awakening, we first have to master something called the human way. And what is that? The human way is defined as the absolute fundamental principles of simply being human. It specifically focuses on fulfilling our societal and familial duties perfectly. We're talking about being a good parent, a respectful child, a reliable worker, and a kind neighbor. It takes all this abstract spiritual philosophy and grounds it directly into everyday responsibility. Because really, you can't transcend the world if you haven't even figured out how to live in it gracefully yet. As the text explicitly points out, cultivating the ultimate Dharma begins with the human way. It's an absolute prerequisite. Think about it. If someone ignores their family, neglects their responsibilities, or mistreats their coworkers, having a conversation with them about ultimate spiritual truths is pretty much impossible. You absolutely have to build that foundation of basic humanity first. Right. So how do we actually go about mastering this human way? The source introduces this concept of forging an upright body and mind, essentially bringing internal discipline and clarity to our external actions. The text gives us a really clear contrast between these two states. When we lack an upright mind, like when we give in to greed or anger or just bad habits, it doesn't only hurt us personally, it ripples outward. It leads to family conflict, societal chaos, and even disaster. But on the flip side, when we actively cultivate that upright mind, we restore peace, harmony, and balance to our homes, and, by extension, to our entire community. To really illustrate how we tame this internal state, the text shares this brilliant little anecdote. An abbot is asked what he actually does to practice spiritually. And his reply is great. He says, "I work every day caring for 2 eagles, fighting a bear, tending to the sick." Now, obviously, he doesn't literally live in a zoo. These are profound metaphors. The eagles, those are his eyes, constantly darting around seeking distraction. The bear represents his anger and his worldly desires that he literally has to wrestle with. And the sick person is his own physical body that requires constant maintenance. So his everyday chores are actually the mastering of his own senses. This whole idea of our internal struggles manifesting as external problems leads us into a fascinating sort of mini mystery from the text. It's the famous allegory of a Zen master and the giant spider. So the story goes that a highly dedicated Zen master was trying to achieve deep, profound meditation. But every single time he closed his eyes and tried to center his mind, this monstrous giant spider would just appear out of nowhere, constantly harassing him and completely ruining his focus. No matter what he tried, he just couldn't chase it away.
Completely desperate, he went to his teacher for advice. Now, the teacher's advice was, well, highly unusual. He didn't hand over a magical incantation or tell him to physically fight the spider. He simply said, next time you meditate, take a brush with ink. When the spider appears, calmly draw a circle on its belly. So the master goes back to his room, he sits, he breathes, he closes his eyes, and right on cue, the terrifying spider appears. But this time, staying perfectly calm, the master takes his brush, reaches out, and draws a perfect circle right on the spider's belly. Almost instantly, the vision fades. He emerges from his deep meditation, opens his eyes, and looks down. And here is the absolute punchline of the story. The circle of ink? It was drawn directly on his own belly. The terrifying monster was never an external threat at all. It was entirely a projection of his own unquiet, wandering mind. The text uses this allegory to deliver this incredibly profound realization. A wandering mind breeds demons. An upright mind breeds Buddhas. Literally, our minds create our own obstacles. When our mind is chaotic, the whole world feels like it's full of giant spiders. Stress, anger, conflict. But when we center ourselves and forge an upright mind, those external demons just dissolve, revealing our inherent Buddha nature. So let's talk about integrating Dharma at home. The absolute crucial point here is taking these high-level realizations and bringing them straight back into your living room. How do we actually stop fighting imaginary spiders and start doing the real work? Well, the source is incredibly clear on this point. Dharma is not in speaking, but in doing. True spiritual practice isn't about lecturing your family with flowery language or showing off how much heavy philosophy you've read. Not at all. It's about quietly being a living, breathing example of peace, discipline, and uprightness. The text actually gives us some very simple, highly informative ways to practice the true Buddha in our day-to-day lives. First up, fulfill your familial duties. Be fully present for the people who actually rely on you. Second, maintain discipline in your daily habits. Tame those eagles and wrestle that bear every single day. Third, actively cultivate genuine compassion for others. And fourth, stop seeking external blame. Always remember that circle on the belly, look inward first. The ultimate takeaway from the text boils down to this quote. In simplicity, there is an eternal truth. There is absolutely no need to flee to a mountaintop or abandon your normal life to find enlightenment. The most profound spiritual truths are literally hiding in plain sight, right there inside your simplest, most routine actions. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. Knowing that the ultimate truth isn't out there, but rather in here, and that the real path isn't about escaping life, but fully engaging with it, how will you practice the true Buddha in your mundane routine tomorrow? I hope this explainer has provided you with a fresh, actionable perspective on your daily life. Thanks so much for joining me.